Have you ever delayed a major decision because you were waiting for one more piece of information? Maybe you were considering a new role, a move to another country, a graduate degree, or a major change in your business. You kept researching, comparing, and asking for advice. Yet the more you learned, the less certain you felt. Here is the uncomfortable truth. In a high-stakes decision, uncertainty is not a temporary problem that perfect research will remove. It is part of the decision itself. You may never know which path is best before you take it. And while you wait, the situation keeps changing. Opportunities expire, costs rise, relationships shift, and sometimes doing nothing quietly becomes your decision. In this episode, we will build a practical system for making consequential choices when the facts are incomplete and every option involves a trade-off. You will learn how decision inertia develops, why perfectionism can make judgment worse, how to identify a least worst option, how to control the timing of a choice, how to test your assumptions, and how to revise a decision without becoming inconsistent. You will also learn more than 25 useful English words and phrases for work, business, and critical thinking, including uncertainty, decision inertia, cognitive closure, trade-off, decision window, working assumption, sunk cost, and course correction. By the end, you will have both a decision-making framework and a stronger English vocabulary for explaining difficult choices clearly. Decision Time by Laurence, Alison, and Neil Shortland is about the small number of choices that can reshape an entire life. The authors are psychologists whose work has examined decision-making in real-world, high-pressure environments involving military personnel, police leaders, emergency responders, and security professionals. Their central question is not, how can we calculate the perfect answer? It is, how can a person commit to responsible action when time is limited, the situation is changing, and no option is free of risk? That distinction matters because many traditional decision models assume that we can compare stable options, estimate likely outcomes, and select the highest value result. But major decisions rarely arrive in such a clean form. Goals may conflict, information may be unreliable, other people may be affected, and the future may change before the plan is complete. The book therefore treats decision-making as an active process rather than a single mental event. A real decision combines three elements: a clear goal, commitment to a course of action, and implementation in the real world. So thinking is necessary, but thinking alone is not deciding. Module 1. Diagnose the decision before you solve it. The first skill is classification. Before comparing options, ask what kind of situation you are actually facing. Not every difficult moment requires a fresh choice. Sometimes a rule already exists. A hospital has a safety protocol, a financial team has a fraud control checklist, and a pilot has an emergency procedure. In these cases, the best response may be disciplined compliance rather than creative debate. Sometimes experience provides a recognizable pattern. An experienced manager may notice that a delayed project is not suffering from poor motivation, but from unclear ownership. She does not need to invent 10 new theories. She has seen the pattern before and can apply a tested response. A genuine choice appears when several workable courses of action exist, important goals compete, and you must justify why one path deserves commitment. This is the kind of decision that creates an imagined alternative future. What would have happened if I had chosen differently? Consider a software company in Seattle that discovers a serious weakness in one of its products. The leadership team has three possibilities. It can follow the existing security protocol and release an immediate patch. It can rely on experience and use a response that worked during an earlier incident. Or it can make a new strategic choice because the weakness reveals a deeper problem with the product itself. If the team treats every part of the situation as a new strategic dilemma, it will waste time debating matters already covered by rules. If it treats the entire problem as routine, it may miss the need for a major product redesign. Good judgment starts by separating the rule-based parts, the experience-based parts, and the parts that truly require choice. The common mistake is to assume that emotional difficulty automatically means decision difficulty. It does not. You may dislike the available action while still knowing exactly what must be done. On the other hand, a calm meeting can hide a genuine conflict between long-term goals. Here is the practical move. Write one sentence beginning with, "The decision I must make is," then add, "This is a real choice because." If you cannot identify competing options, competing goals, and a need to commit, you may not have a decision problem. You may have an execution problem, an information problem, or a rule you are resisting. There is another reason classification matters. It exposes passive choices. If you know the issue requires action but repeatedly refuse to choose, the current situation continues by default. That default has consequences. A company that does not replace an obsolete system is choosing to accept rising maintenance risk. A professional who never applies for a different role is choosing to remain available to the present employer. Inaction may be reasonable, but it should be named and evaluated like any other option. Also, separate choosing from doing. A team may agree that a product should be retired, yet postpone customer communication, staffing changes, and technical shutdown. The mental preference exists, but the decision is incomplete. For every genuine choice, specify the first observable action, the person responsible, and the date it begins. Commitment without implementation is only intention. This distinction protects your attention. In an age of information overload, people often spend their best mental energy reconsidering settled procedures while giving too little attention to the one choice that can actually change the outcome. Module 2. Break decision inertia by defining what cannot be lost. Once you know that a genuine choice exists, the next danger is decision inertia. Decision inertia is the failure to move from awareness to commitment. It can take three forms: avoiding the issue, repeating the same analysis without gaining useful insight, or announcing a choice but failing to implement it. This trap is powerful because delay can feel responsible. You tell yourself that you are being careful. You open another spreadsheet, schedule another meeting, or ask another expert. But if the new work does not change your understanding, it is redundant deliberation. Thinking that creates activity without creating progress. Why do people get stuck? One reason is maximization. A maximizer wants the best possible outcome and finds it painful to accept that every option has disadvantages. In ordinary shopping, this tendency may simply waste time. In a major decision, it can become dangerous because the situation may not allow a best option. High-stakes decisions are often least worst decisions. This does not mean choosing carelessly or expecting failure. It means recognizing that every available path carries cost, risk, or loss, and selecting the path that protects what matters most. Imagine a family-owned manufacturer in Ohio. Its largest customer has cut orders, and cash reserves will last only 8 months. The owners can close one facility, seek outside investment, and lose some control, or continue unchanged and hope demand returns. None of these options is attractive. The desire to protect every employee, preserve full ownership, and avoid disruption is understandable, but it is not achievable. The leadership team needs to identify its critical goal. Is the non-negotiable priority keeping the company alive, protecting the greatest number of jobs, preserving family control? These goals may all matter, but they cannot all receive equal weight. This is where values become operational. A sacred value is something you regard as non-negotiable, while a secular value is important but open to trade. The hardest decisions arise when two sacred values collide, such as loyalty to employees and responsibility for the company's survival. The common mistake is to describe every preference as essential. When everything is sacred, nothing can guide the choice. A useful values list should be ranked, tested, and connected to behavior. Ask 3 questions. What outcome would be painful but survivable? What outcome would violate a value I cannot accept? What sacrifice am I willing to make to protect the more important goal? Then convert the answer into a decision boundary. For example, we will accept reduced ownership, but we will not continue a strategy that creates a serious risk of insolvency. That sentence does not remove uncertainty, but it turns values into direction. The landing point is simple. Do not ask only, which option gives me the most? Also ask, which loss can I tolerate, and which loss must I prevent? That is often the question that releases decision inertia. Module 3. Build situational awareness with competing stories. The first letter in the book STAR approach is S, for situational awareness and the stories we use to understand events. Situational awareness means noticing what is happening, explaining why it may be happening, and projecting what could happen next. The word story is important because facts never interpret themselves. When information is incomplete, the mind connects scattered details into a narrative. That narrative may be reasonable, but it is still a working explanation rather than proven reality. Suppose a product director in Toronto is leading a cross-border launch. Sales in the first month are far below forecast. One story says the market does not want the product. A second says the product is useful, but the pricing model is wrong. A third says the launch is too early to judge because a distribution partner has failed to complete its rollout. Each story points toward a different action. The first supports cancellation. The second supports a pricing experiment. The third supports fixing distribution and waiting. If the director becomes emotionally attached to the first explanation, every weak sales number will look like confirmation that the product is doomed. Strong decision makers avoid 2 extremes. The first is premature certainty, creating one explanation and treating it as fact. The second is uncontrolled possibility, generating so many explanations that no action is possible. A practical middle ground is to hold 2 or 3 plausible stories at the same time. One of those stories should include a credible worst-case scenario. This is not pessimism. It is preparation designed to identify a danger that would require fast protection if it proved true. For each story, ask for questions. What evidence supports it? What evidence weakens it? What would I expect to observe next if it were true? What low-cost test could separate it from the alternatives? In the Toronto example, the team could interview lost customers, run a limited pricing test, and review the distributor's activation data. The goal is not to gather everything. It is to collect information with decision value, information that can actually change the preferred course of action. A common mistake is to confuse vivid information with important information. A harsh customer comment may dominate attention because it is emotional, while broader usage data tells a different story. Another mistake is anchoring on the first explanation presented in a meeting. The practical landing point is this. Before committing, write down 3 short narratives titled Most Likely, Alternative, and Serious Risk. Then identify one observation that would make you update each narrative. This keeps your thinking flexible without turning the decision into endless speculation. Module 4. Control the decision window. The T in STAR is time mastery. Every major decision has a decision window. The period during which information can still be gathered and action can still influence the outcome. Some windows are imposed from outside. A contract expires on Friday. A storm is approaching. A competing company has made an offer. Other windows are invisible. No one forces you to decide whether to change careers, relocate, or close an unprofitable project. Because the deadline is not obvious, delay can continue for years. Time mastery begins with 2 separate questions. First, how long can I safely wait? Second, what useful work should happen while I wait? Consider a renewable energy company in Denmark that is preparing to enter the U.S. market. A new regulation is expected, but the final details are uncertain. Launching now may create an early advantage, yet it may also require expensive redesign. Waiting may reduce regulatory risk, but competitors could secure the best partners. The company should not choose between decide today and wait until everything is certain. It should define the last responsible moment for commitment. The team might decide that it can spend 6 weeks gathering targeted information, but after that point, partner contracts and production schedules will begin to close. During those 6 weeks, every research task should answer a decision-relevant question. How likely is the regulation to affect the current design? What is the cost of a reversible pilot? What commitments become irreversible after a particular date? This creates a useful rhythm. Slow, slow, quick, quick. Move slowly enough at the beginning to understand the situation and clarify the goal. Then, once additional information produces diminishing returns, choose and implement quickly. Poor decision makers often reverse that rhythm. They rush through diagnosis, then become slow when commitment is required. A reliable warning sign is repetition. When meetings keep producing the same questions, the same arguments, and the same evidence, more time is no longer buying better judgment. It is buying emotional comfort. The common timing mistake is to set a deadline without setting an information plan. A date alone can create panic. The opposite mistake is to create a research plan without a commitment date. That creates an elegant form of procrastination. Use this 3-part rule. Name the decision date. List the 2 or 3 unknowns that could genuinely change the choice, and define what you will do if those unknowns remain unresolved. For example, we will decide on September 15th. Before then, we will confirm the likely regulatory range, the cost of a pilot, and partner availability. If uncertainty remains, we will choose the option that limits irreversible exposure. The landing point is not act fast. It is spend time where it improves the decision, then stop buying information that no longer changes anything. Module 5. Test assumptions and resist cognitive closure. The A in STAR is adaptation. Adaptation is the ability to update your understanding when the environment changes or when new evidence challenges your original view. This sounds obvious, but it works against a strong psychological tendency. Cognitive closure. Cognitive closure is the desire to reach a firm answer and stop dealing with ambiguity. A high need for closure can make certainty feel more valuable than accuracy. Once people begin to favor an option, they often search for confirming evidence. They explain away contradictions, reduce the value of late arriving information, and describe disagreement as negativity. The choice becomes easier to defend precisely because the mind has stopped testing it. Imagine a European retail company evaluating a partnership with a fast-growing logistics startup. The startup's presentation is impressive. Its founders are confident, its software demonstration is smooth, and its price is attractive. Senior leaders quickly begin describing the partnership as a transformation. Then uncomfortable information arrives. Service data comes from a small sample. Two former clients report integration problems. The startup's cash position is weaker than expected. A team with a high need for closure may say, every young company has problems, and continue toward the original agreement. An adaptive team treats its preferred option as a working assumption, not a personal commitment. It asks, what would have to be true for this plan to succeed? Then it tests those conditions. 5 habits improve assumption testing. First, argue the opposite case. Build the strongest reasonable explanation for why your preferred choice is wrong. Second, give later evidence a fair hearing instead of automatically treating the first information as more reliable. Third, avoid false binaries. A partnership may be neither a full agreement nor a complete rejection. A limited pilot may exist. Fourth, invite a credible dissenter who has permission to challenge the group. Fifth, audit the evidence for gaps, contradictions, and untested claims. In practice, the retail company might run a 90-day pilot in one region, require access to service records, and set performance thresholds before broader commitment. This creates a reversible test rather than a dramatic leap. The common mistake is to believe that adaptability means having no conviction. In reality, a decision maker can commit strongly to an action while remaining open to evidence. Commitment applies to the current plan. Loyalty applies to the goal, not to the first theory. Another mistake is to collect more information without asking how it will affect the choice. Information overload can hide weak reasoning beneath large quantities of data. 100 slides do not help if none of them tests the central assumption. The landing point is to place one sentence at the top of every major decision document. We will reconsider this choice if. Complete that sentence before the group becomes emotionally invested. A predefined update trigger makes course correction more rational and less personal. Module 6. Revise without becoming unreliable. The R in STAR includes revision and the resilience required to live with a decision after it has been made. Revision means reviewing the course of action as results appear and changing it when the original logic no longer holds. This creates a difficult balance. Change too quickly, and every obstacle becomes proof that the decision was wrong. Refuse to change, and persistence becomes stubbornness. Picture an American entrepreneur who has spent 3 years building a subscription service for independent restaurants. The first year was promising, but customer growth has now been flat for 18 months. The team has improved the product, changed the pricing, and increased marketing. The founder continues because she believes successful companies require grit. Grit can be valuable when difficulty is part of meaningful progress, but persistence becomes inappropriate when it has lost its connection to a goal. Repeating an action is not automatically courageous. Sometimes it is a way of avoiding the pain of admitting that the original approach no longer works. One major obstacle is the sunk cost effect. A sunk cost is time, money, or effort that has already been spent and cannot be recovered. Rationally, it should not determine what you do next. Emotionally, it often does. People say, we have invested too much to stop. when the better question is, given what we know today, where should the next dollar and the next month go? The founder needs a structured review. Are customers receiving the value the company promised? Have the key assumptions improved or weakened? Is the main goal still important? Is the current strategy the best available route to that goal? What evidence would justify another 6 months? The answer may be to continue, pivot to a narrower market, sell the technology, or close the company. Revision does not automatically mean abandonment. It may mean changing the route while protecting the purpose. The common mistake is outcome bias, judging a decision only by whether the result was good. A responsible choice can produce a bad result because uncertainty is real. An irresponsible choice can occasionally succeed through luck. Review the quality of the process as well as the outcome. A useful decision review separates 4 questions. What did we know at the time? What assumptions did we make? What has changed since then? What action now best serves the goal? Set review points in advance. A career change might be reviewed after 6 months and 12 months. A business pilot might be reviewed after a fixed number of customers. Pre-scheduled reviews prevent daily anxiety from driving constant reversal, while also preventing sunk costs from creating endless commitment. The landing point is this: persist through difficulty when the goal remains important and the evidence still supports the route. Revise when the route no longer serves the goal. Your identity should not depend on proving that your first decision was permanent. Module 7. Protect the decision maker, not just the decision. A sound method can still fail when the person using it is exhausted, frightened, isolated, or overwhelmed. The final capability in decision time is resilience, the capacity to recover from pressure, remain flexible, and continue functioning after a difficult outcome. Stress changes the way we process information. Under acute pressure, attention narrows. We may lock onto the most visible threat, lose track of alternatives, and react before we have defined the problem. Under chronic pressure, the effects can be quieter but equally damaging. Poor sleep, financial strain, workplace conflict, and constant uncertainty reduce patience and mental flexibility. They make cognitive closure more attractive because a quick answer promises relief. Consider a project leader in London managing a delayed technology rollout across 4 countries. For months, she has worked late, absorbed conflict between departments, and worried that failure will damage her career. When a vendor proposes a costly emergency solution, she wants to accept immediately. The proposal may be useful, but her urgency is partly a desire to end the pressure. Before making a major commitment, she needs to stabilize her decision capacity. That may mean taking 10 minutes away from the meeting, slowing her breathing, writing down the goal, and asking a trusted colleague to challenge her interpretation. In a less urgent situation, it may mean sleeping before deciding, reducing unnecessary meetings, or seeking advice from someone who is not emotionally invested in the outcome. This is not weakness, it is decision hygiene. You would not trust a financial model with corrupted data. You should not fully trust a judgment process when your physical and emotional system is clearly overloaded. Resilience also matters after the decision. Even a well-reasoned choice may lead to regret, criticism, or loss. People often create a counterfactual story, an imagined version of the road not taken, and compare that perfect fantasy with the imperfect reality they now face. The comparison is unfair because the alternative path would also have contained uncertainty and cost. A healthier review asks, was my process responsible given the information available? It also asks, what can I learn without pretending I should have predicted the future? for supports strengthen resilience over time. The first is physical capacity, sleep, movement, nutrition, and recovery. The second is purpose, a clear connection between daily effort and a meaningful goal. The third is social support, people who can provide perspective, honesty, and practical help. The fourth is feedback, regular information about what is working and what needs to change. The common mistake is to treat resilience as endless endurance. Resilience is not the ability to tolerate any condition forever. It includes recovery, learning, and intelligent withdrawal. Another mistake is to make a major decision only to escape an emotion. Relief is an outcome, but it should not automatically become the goal. Use a brief readiness check before consequential choices. Am I physically depleted? Am I reacting to immediate fear or anger? Have I spoken with someone who can disagree with me? Can I state the goal in one sentence? If the answer reveals serious impairment and time allows, create space before committing. The landing point is that decision quality depends on both the framework and the condition of the decision maker. Build resilience before the crossroads. Use support during the decision, and review the result without turning uncertainty into self-blame. Let's turn the framework into 7 small practices you can use this week. First, classify the problem. Ask whether you need to follow a rule, apply experience, or make a genuine choice between competing goals. Second, write a one-sentence goal and make it specific enough to guide action. I want a better job is vague. I want work that protects my health and gives me 2 evenings a week with my family is usable. Third, identify the unacceptable loss. When no perfect option exists, define the outcome you must prevent and use it as a boundary for a least worst decision. Fourth, create 3 plausible stories. The most likely explanation, a reasonable alternative, and a serious risk scenario. Then collect only the information that can distinguish among them. Fifth, set a decision window. Choose a final decision date. List the unknowns worth investigating, and decide what you will do if uncertainty remains. Sixth, write an update trigger before committing. I will reconsider this plan if this protects you from cognitive closure and makes later course correction easier. Seventh, schedule a review. At that point, separate sunk costs from future value and ask what you knew, what you assumed, what changed, and what action now serves the goal. One final practice supports all 7. Check your condition. When stress is high, slow your breathing, step away briefly, and speak with someone who can challenge you honestly. A high-quality decision is not a prediction that guarantees a good result. It is a responsible commitment made with clear goals, tested assumptions, appropriate timing, and the courage to act under uncertainty. Before we wrap up, here are 7 expressions you can use in your own work conversations. Decision inertia means staying stuck instead of moving from thought to action. A trade-off is the benefit you give up when you choose another path. A least worst option is the most acceptable choice when every option has serious disadvantages. Your decision window is the time available before delay begins to reduce your options. A working assumption is an explanation you use for now while remaining open to new evidence. Cognitive closure is the urge to end uncertainty too quickly, and a course correction is a practical change in direction after new information appears. You can combine them naturally. We are approaching the end of our decision window, so let's test our working assumptions and choose the least worst option. Or, this new evidence may require a course correction, even though we have already invested heavily. What's the biggest decision you're facing right now? Or which phrase did you find most useful? Let me know in the comments.